Hi all, welcome to this new episode of my podcast, A Digital Tomorrow. Today I'm joined by Matteo Rizzi, entrepreneur, investor, and author. Welcome, Matteo, to my show.
Hey, Ariel, it's a pleasure. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
The pleasure is mine. And could you please tell my listeners a bit more about your personal journey? What made you decide to enter the fintech world? How did you become such an expert on those key topics? Anything you want to share with my audience will be welcome.
Sure, of course. One could argue that not voluntarily, right? But I joined a team that almost, I want to say, created the movement, or certainly was really at the beginning of it, because I spent 13 years at Swift. Swift, that unfortunately today is infamously famous, for what's happening in the world right now. It shouldn't be, because they should be just the plumbers, of the financial industry. And in 2009, we created something called InnoTribe, which is considered one of the pioneers of the whole fintech movement. And InnoTribe was a brand inside Swift that was actually start talking about financial services innovation to incumbents, and so we were preaching the startup world to the large financial institutions and insurances. We created InnoTribe at Cybos, which was like this thought leadership movement where, I don't know, Vitalik Buterin came to introduce Ethereum to the bankers, for example. That's how pioneer that movement was. And also we created the first global startup challenge, between London, Singapore, and New York. The first winner was TransferWise, and then Revolut, and Currency Cloud, and Asimo, and Mambu, and all the unicorns, most of the unicorns. Number 26 is actually an exception, but most of the unicorns that you see today, they actually passed by this InnoTribe umbrella, if you want to. That, as far as I'm concerned, lasted until 2013, because I left Swift. And I left because I wanted to build a fund inside the company to be able to invest in all these startups. I failed, basically, so I did not succeed in building this fund. So I left of my own will. And then I became an investor with different funds and corporate venture capitals, Intesa Sanpaolo and Societe Generale Corporate Venture Capital, to give you a couple of examples. But also I was a partner of a $100 million fund funded by Sberbank back in 2013, and Omidyar Network investing in Africa. So I always kept an investor hat. And the entrepreneur's hat is a company called FinTech Stage, now FTSGroup, that we built together with Lázaro Campos, the former CEO of Swift, in 2015, and is a boutique innovation consultancy firm. We help funds to build a deal flow, large companies to build an innovation ecosystem, and so forth. And then there is also I want to say, marketing and speaking and writing activity. I've wrote a couple of books. I speak, as well as you, in a few conferences across the world. And I also, I'm the executive producer of a podcast called Breaking Banks Europe, which is the twin show of Breaking Banks. Is the most listened fintech podcast in the world. We've been like 2.5 years down the road. We also create Breaking Payments and so forth. So I always like to say that I have these three hats, and as an author, of course, I should mentioning as well, I wrote FinTech Revolution in 2016 about, trying to explain fintech in very simple words. And then I wrote 2 years ago, Talent and Rebels, and this is more a book about lateral thinkers, like innovators who are mostly, very little understood in large corporations. And the book basically talks about, how, this is the book, how disruptive innovation can can help companies to survive. I always say that incremental innovation is what keeps the business growing, but disruptive innovation is what keeps the business alive. So, but in order to keep your business alive and protect it from potential threat, you need people who spends time with a very particular optics and brain and attitude to figure out what the company is not doing today, not just simply doing a little bit better what they do already. Mm-hmm. So that's the story, Oriol.
Well, thank you for sharing. And before digging deep in your two books, I wanted to ask you a couple more questions about what you said now about your personal journey. Like, for example, you mentioned that you created back in 2015 FinTech Stage. And well, as far as I know, one of the goals of FinTech Stage is being this platform for investors to boost FinTech innovation globally. So what are, in general, the main challenges that you or others that you know encountered when trying to boost FinTech globally?
So, as many of, we don't have a product, at FinTech Stage. We have a network, we have a huge experience, and we have we could see, we could check what worked and what didn't, in the past, decade and a half, basically. And the challenge is that you need to be aware and mindful of what is replicable in a given ecosystem compared to others, where, even if you replicate the same things, the results might not be the same. Let me explain myself. So, we worked with the FinTech Stage in some of the African countries, right? So from Mozambique to Egypt to Tanzania to Nigeria. And, we, at the beginning, we always preached the fact that everyone should copy London, because, InnoTribe was the first tenant of Level 39, which is the super famous London hub that everyone knows today, but we were the first tenant, right? Back in, I don't even know, that could be 2009 or 10 or something. I know I visited the place with just, cement and no furniture and no nothing, back then, just the floor, the empty floor. So, and everyone, what we said is that, listen, look what worked in London, so a physical hub, the investors, the startups, the government engagement, the academy engagement, the regulators engagement, and so forth. But truth is that not every country has the same readiness, right? So when we were called, for example, to Nigeria to say, hey, we need to start an ecosystem here, and it was 2015, 16 probably, we did not have all the elements, right, of all these pillars that did make, for example, London work. So we had to educate before. And I think that this is it's almost an art, Oriol, right? So it's not a product, but it's a way to say, okay, we feel like the regulator is ready, but the investors are not. Or we feel that, the startup ecosystem is not strong enough or not educated enough, or sort of not covering all the gaps, that in terms of what the financial services ecosystem innovation should have, like the payments and the lending and the profile and the onboarding and the identity and the digital banks. So the patterns are replicable, right? So the challenge is there is not one size fits all in terms of say, hey, we want to build something that, really, results in a financial inclusion of most of the population in my country. You can't simply apply a formula and make it work. This is where I believe is the difference between people who read the books and then apply the theory, and people like us who has done it several times and kind of feel it. You see what I mean? It sounds strange, but the truth is that, as I said, is very close to a piece of art which is by definition unique.
I see, indeed. Yeah, I mean, I don't think those topics are easy at all. I myself am quite involved in the area of financial inclusion. I co-lead the Financial Inclusion Working Group at the Global Impact FinTech Forum, and it's pretty much what you said. I completely agree with you. I mean, you cannot just like apply theories to the real world and that's all. No, I think it's kind of an art. It requires much more than just applying a theory because each case is different.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And before, when you were talking about your personal journey, you mentioned as well that you wrote 2 books. You wrote those 2 very interesting books, The FinTech Revolution and Talent Rebels. I would like to start discussing your first book, FinTech Revolution, which, if I'm not mistaken, you published 6 years ago, back in 2016. It's been a while, especially for such a fast-changing industry, but could you please summarize with my listeners what this book was about, and also whether you think that most of your ideas or predictions came true, or whether there is any area that went differently from expected?
So this is actually a very interesting question that I don't think I ever answered since I wrote the book, because it's true that 6 years in this industry is like a lifetime. And by the way, unfortunately, this one, if you don't speak Italian, you can't read, because I just, this was commissioned by the University of Bocconi in Italy, and it was I think it was a sign that I needed to be nudged, to write the first book, and then I discovered that I like it, and now like book number 3 is in the making. I actually think that book is very actual right now, or it would be very actual, because it is not about trends. Is about, for example, the reason why digital banks were born, or is about like why would be smart to have a decentralized financial system, or is a book about why is it that try to explain why the alternative lending industry is the first one who exploded, right? In very simple words, and I always give the example that a bank, unfortunately, is not able to lend, a couple of $20,000 to a florist 2 weeks before St. Valentine's Day. And a bank is not able to do this. They can't decide that fast. 20,000 is not a loan that is interesting for them. Even if every single florist on earth would give back the loan after St. Valentine's, right? Because by definition, they need more stock, they need more flowers, because St. Valentine's is in 2 weeks. It's very simple. So building a startup that is able to make this type of loans is why FinTech was born. Very simple, So that's how, and this is like the example of the lending industry. But I made the same examples in the book about payments, about onboarding, about the difficulties of, for example, harmonizing the pension systems. Each chapter is like a stream of innovation. When back then I was giving the reason and the good reason to innovate, and also a couple of examples of startups. But hey, back then, number 26 was just born, literally, and it was 2016. It has exploded in the meantime, but actually in FinTech Stage, we also organized the FinTech Stage Festival in Milan and all over the world, but especially in Italy. And I remember Valentin came to Milan, Valentin Stauf, the CEO of number 26, twice actually to give a speech, and the bank was just born, right? So because you know, I did not talk about simply the trends without any example. I tried to relate fintech to real life. That's why I think that the book specifically is it would be still actual, very actual.
Actually, in your summary, you mentioned in your summary to the book that that credit cards will soon no longer exist, and they will be replaced by payment systems based on apps and smartphones, which is something that we're actually seeing right now. So I wanted to ask you, like, what role do you think that virtual banks will play in the future of payments? And also, what role do you think that cryptocurrencies will play in the future of payments? Because I know that's a tricky area as well, so I wanted to hear your opinion on both of them, on virtual banking as well as cryptos.
So, you know, the challenge of all these neobanks, even if when you talk to every single founder of what you and I would call neobank, they say they don't want to be called neobanks because they are banks, you know, which is fair enough. I think that their future is will be very much linked to the capability of monetizing the clients, right? Because I don't know, I imagine you do have also at least one or two of this like a neobanks account, whether it's TransferWise or Revolut or N26 or Starling or Chime, you name it. I have two, for examples, but truth is that I'm using one account for my company because it's practical, one account for myself. But truth is that when I need to go for like for a loan or to like unify all my insurances, or even like the big account, the accounts where I manage, you know, I also built like a real estate. Talking about being an entrepreneur, I built a real estate company here in Lisbon, where I'm based, right? And these accounts are all managed by traditional banks because they're more solid, right? And somehow, especially in this very, you know, everyday changing world, I would rather have you know, the bulk of my wealth, you know, in a traditional player than in a non-traditional one, simply because, hey, you know, technically speaking, Revolut is not yet making profit, right? So would you sign, you know, with your blood that they will still be here in 10 years? I think so. But if I had to bet between this and Millennium, which is the first bank in Portugal, I would say probably the first bank in Portugal, you know, to give you an example, right? So this is their challenge, and payments is actually part of it, right? I don't think that payments alone will be sufficient, you know, to guarantee the perennity of this large, you know, digital banks. But it will be a very essential component to it. For example, the integration between payments and bookkeeping, you know, is for very small SMEs, or for the gig economy, you know, or for the creators economy. There are 100 million of players from the creator economy that will need to receive payments from all over the world. Very small payments in every single possible currency, you know. These are sort of the typical challenges that it is way more likely for a digital bank to solve than for a traditional one. Actually, the reason why I moved my own SME local company from an incumbent to TransferWise is because they would not be able to give me a credit card that would not charge me for abroad payments. As simple as that, you know. And so all of a sudden, they have lost me as a client for something that it would not be very complicated to implement, right? So this continuous adapting, in between old and new, are the challenges that both the neobanks and incumbents will have to face.
Mm-hmm. No, I think you said before about neobanks makes perfect sense, and it's actually my experience as well. For example, when it comes to the case of Hong Kong, which I know very well, as you know, 8 virtual banks were launched in Hong Kong, 1 year and a half ago, 2 years ago in 2020. And even though some of these virtual banks have like over 200,000 customers, which, I mean, it's a lot out of a 7 million population. When you look at what kind of transactions these people do, or maybe I should put it differently, when you look at why these people use those accounts in neobanks, you will soon realize that people normally open these accounts as a backup account. No? I mean, as you said before, when you were talking about Millennium, any big transaction is still done via the incumbents. No, when it comes, I don't know, like big credits, mortgages, whatever. No, and then when it comes to those neobanks, they are mostly used by people as a means to have like an account with less money to make like this kind of smaller payments, because when it comes to payments, to credit cards and what they offer you, I mean, they offer you certain advantages, no? But when it comes to bigger transactions and bigger stuff, generally speaking, then that's a different case, no? And I guess that's what you said now as well, no? It's the same idea, and I think, I mean, I fully concur, but at the same time, you also mentioned that incumbents need to adapt, and I think that makes perfect sense as well. We are still, I mean, we are in 2022, and we're still seeing some kind of fees charged to us by incumbents that do not make much sense in our globalized world, no? So I think, I mean, in the same way that neobanks need to show people that they can be relied in the same way as an incumbent, and they need to start making profits as well, no? Because as you said, most of them are not making actual profits yet. And in the same way that this is true, it is also true that incumbents should be more flexible or try to adapt to the current world.
Which, by the way, makes me, I all of a sudden remember what was the second part of the question, and it's a good transition. You asked about cryptocurrencies, and how they could sort of be part of this not only payments revolution, by the way. And I will not get into like a crypto itself, but I would rather talk about decentralized finance, which if you couple it with the financial inclusion theme, which is what we were mentioning earlier, I think that DeFi will be the key to include the what I call the bottom billions, right? Or at least it is today the best and the fastest chance to give access to not simply payments, but financial services, to this type of people. Because frankly, if I've been like involved, more than involved, actually, actively playing a role, I like to think, since 2015 in Africa, okay? Mm-hmm. I went to over 20 countries, helped more than 10 to like organize their ecosystems. I myself, I advise 5 or 6 African startups in different domains. And frankly, payments are pretty, especially mobile payments, with the penetration of mobile phones, are not the biggest problem or the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge is actually being able to profile adequately these clients to be able to give them even the smallest amount of capital to help them grow. Mobile payments, if you go to Kenya or even in Francophone Africa, are super popular, and you can pay. It is way easier to pay with your phone in Dakar than in Madrid. Way easier, or at least maybe post-pandemic now, but that was certainly the case until a couple of years ago, right? Mm-hmm. So Africa is where Europe post-pandemic is, but they have been like this for years already, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I could, as simply as put money in seeders to fund a startup in the UK, or to give money into a GoFundMe initiative in Europe, help a startup in giving nairas, to a Nigerian company, that would be a major step forward, right? For because everyone thinks of the Flutterwave and the Lydia and the cheaper cash and the Paystack, this huge funding, right? But there are like Agritech, for example, is by far the first employers in Africa, right? The agricultural tech revolution is huge. And what is missing is the seed capital to help it grow. That seed capital, not necessarily equity, but simply debt, it would totally be repaid with decent interest. But you know that if any of the farmers in most of the African countries go to the bank, they would ask for a 40% interest collateralized, which is impossible, right? Unless you're an owner of the house. I'm not giving you a house that is potentially gone just because I would not reimburse a 10K loan, right? So DeFi will make this completely ubiquitous financial services system, it will make it ubiquitous, right? So it would be as easy for me from Lisbon to fund a startup in Kenya than from a Kenya. This is one example, just in the micro lending space. But when you think of it, once you build the infrastructure, you can sort of stack all the financial services, in a totally sort of technologically transparent way, because it seems like a big, it seems complex, but it doesn't have to be. At the user level, it will be completely transparent. The experience will be the same.
Well, I think this part, everything that you mentioned now about DeFi in Africa is very interesting, to the point that I think we should devote like a whole episode to it, no? Because I think there should be so much to discuss that we cannot do it now, but I would really like to discuss this with you again in the future, because I think there's much more to it. But at least we got the general idea, no, from you, and I think it's going to give a lot to think about to myself and to all my listeners. And then, moving forward, there is one more book that you published back in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, and it's that book that you mentioned as well during your presentation, which is called Talent and Rebels. So if you could please let my listeners know what this book is about and why you talk about rebels.
So thank you for the little sort of self-love question. So the book tells the story about what I call them the misfits, the lateral talents, and is inspired by the fact that we were 4 people co-founding InnoTribe back at Swift. The extended team was 9 people. We literally enabled, the large startup ecosystem worldwide, make the bankers sort of start thinking of collaboration with startups and stuff like that. And then a few years later, none of the InnoTribe early founders or team are still working at Swift. They're all gone. And so I started thinking that there was a pattern, for companies to be able or not be able, or be able for a while and not be able anymore, to work with this type of a little bit unconventional people, the misfits. And so I start digging and do some research and interviewing other type of talents like this one. And of course, the book is also inspired by my own story. And I started connecting the dots, right? And me leaving a job after 13 years without a contract was completely consistent with the way that I took other jobs before, or the way I choose my own career, like university and my own, education path. And I said, okay, this is a type of talent that is not more or less, or is, as I mentioned in the book, that the rebels are not superheroes, or like a sort of a noble talent versus another type of it, but they are simply an asset that today corporations are not leveraging very often. So I give examples, I interview, I want to say, other fellow rebels, not only from the financial industry, of course. And then I share what I learned about how to cluster these talents, how to make them a part of the company culture, how to organize certain, type of activities for these rebels or these like lateral talents to step up, and show their face, so that once you identify them, then you can sort of use them, and put them at work in a complementary way with the other type of talents that you have in your company. And then, of course, there are super famous stories about this type of lateral talents not being heard, and basically caused the bankruptcy of the company. Kodak is a good example that we all know. Netflix and Blockbuster is another great example that it is not as known, but every time I tell the story in my keynotes, and everyone starts realizing that a couple of things. First of all, if you are for a large corporation, you always have in mind this very few people that seems odd, right? That you don't really know what they're doing there. You can feel that that are passionate about, they're very knowledgeable, they're passionate, they care about the company, they care more about the impact that what they make at the end of the month. There are a bunch of characteristics that are common to these people. So you realize that these guys and girls are there, but very often they're simply, as I call it, tolerated very often, right? And most of the missed opportunities in corporations are because there is only, happen because there is only one type of innovation that is cared for, which is what I call the incremental innovation, and not the disruptive one. So the book is about talents and disruptive innovation, basically.
And well, before wrapping our discussion up, because we'll be running out of time soon, but I wanted to ask you one final question about this book. And basically, in your summary, you mentioned that, and I quote you, the tension between the business as usual and what's coming next is not something any company should be afraid of. And rebels are there to transform this tension in an opportunity, if you know how to deal with it. So my question to you would actually be quite short. How to deal with that?
So there are methodologies actually that all impacts your company culture, that basically allows a broadened thinking about the future of the company and the future of the business in general, right? Because sometimes the two things might not coincide. A company doing a business today the business might change and the company might change, and they might not change in the same way. And it's okay as soon as you're conscious and you build the proper infrastructure to deal with it, right? So, and as I said, that there are a bunch of basic, I want to say corporate tools, but tools not as a platform, but settings, and mindset changes and dialogues that needs to happen, and hierarchy structures that need to be put in place that basically flatten a little bit on one side the way that talents can talk to each other and can talk to the guys who actually can make the decision. Sometimes you have a rebel who is a CEO. It happens. Actually, Lazzaro Campos, he was a rebel. He is a rebel, and he used to be CEO of Swift. We created DinoTribe because he asked for an innovation arm. That's how we started, right? Well, of course, if you're a CEO of a large corporation, you cannot simply be, the lunatic rebel that takes erratic decisions, right? Because this is not about being a rebel. Being a rebel is a mindset. Is not, having piercing and wearing black and and throw away all your suits and ties, or it might be, but what we are saying is that there are ways to discover them. There are ways to cluster them and connect them to the rest of the company. And there are ways to actually establish a culture of try and fail fast, which is, every single consultant on earth is now talking about fail fast as something that should be part of the culture, right? Truth is that one thing is what you read in the books, and another thing is what can happen in a company, because not every company is ready. So there are different nuances of this failing fast sort of trial and error culture, but a little doses of it should be present in every company. So these and more are like a part of the thesis of the book, that also sort of categorizes the different kind of rebels. There is the builder and the leader and the connector. There is not a single character, and as in most cases, being able to recognize who these guys are and being able to, again, sort of move from the tolerant mode into the empowering mode is key for the success.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much for sharing this. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, so we'll need to wrap up this discussion, but it's been a pleasure, Matteo, to speak with you for this half an hour, a bit more than half an hour, actually. I think we all got to learn a lot from you, both me and my listeners, from your books, from your amazing personal journey, and in general from the FinTech world. So, I mean, for that, I would like to thank you. And well, as I said, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Oriol. And thanks for sort of being this amplifier of stories. Is super important. Thank you. It's a pleasure.
No, thank you, and well, to all my listeners, thank you very much for listening to this episode with Matteo, and please stay tuned for the next episodes, which will be coming very soon. Thank you, and see you soon. Bye.